Growing up in a cozy, sunlit kitchen filled with the aroma of freshly baked cookies and cakes, Sarah had always been enchanted by the world of baking. From the tender age of 6, she could be found standing on a stool by the kitchen counter, her tiny hands eagerly helping to measure flour and sugar, her eyes sparkling with joy each time her creations came out of the oven. Baking was not just a hobby for young Sarah, it was a passion that filled her heart with warmth and happiness. As Sarah grew, so did her skills and her dreams. Throughout high school, she became known for her extraordinary baking talent, winning several local baking competitions. Her peers were always eager to taste her latest concoctions, and teachers often found themselves looking forward to school events where Sarah's baked goods would be the highlight. It was during these formative years that Sarah realized baking was more than a pastime. It was her calling. She envisioned herself opening a quaint bakery, a place filled with the comforting smell of cinnamon and chocolate, a haven for those seeking solace in a slice of cake or a warm, buttery croissant. However, not everyone shared Sarah's vision for her future. Her mother, Amy, stood as a stark contrast to the bright, hopeful world Sarah dreamed of. Amy was a respected doctor known for her stern demeanor and pragmatic approach to life. To Amy, the world was not a place for dreams and passions, but a battlefield where practicality and financial stability reigned supreme. She saw Sarah's baking not as a talent, but as a whimsical distraction from what she considered a proper career path. "Sarah, you can't be serious about this baking fantasy," Amy would often say, her voice tinged with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "You have a brilliant mind. You could be saving lives, making a real difference in the world as a doctor." "But Mom, baking does make a difference. It brings people joy, comfort. It's what makes me happy," Sarah would respond, her voice a blend of defiance and pleading. Amy would sigh, a heavy, defeated sound. "Happiness won't pay the bills, Sarah. It's time to think about your future seriously. You need a career that will ensure stability and respect something substantial, not this." The tension between Sarah's dream and her mother's expectations cast a shadow over Sarah's aspirations, leaving her at a crossroads between following her heart and appeasing her mother's wishes. The path ahead was uncertain, and Sarah knew that choosing her passion might mean risking the approval of the one person she longed to make proud. Yet deep down, the flame of her passion for baking continued to flicker, refusing to be extinguished by doubt or fear. The ongoing disputes between Sarah and her mother, Amy, about Sarah's future grew more intense as time passed. The house, once filled with the comforting aroma of baking, now often echoed with raised voices in the heavy silence that followed their arguments. Amy, steadfast in her belief that a medical career was the only viable path for Sarah, left no stone unturned in her efforts to sway her daughter. She would frequently lament to her friends about Sarah's unrealistic aspirations, painting a picture of a future fraught with uncertainty and hardship if Sarah pursued baking as a career. Feeling cornered and emotionally drained, Sarah found herself grappling with a torrent of guilt and confusion. Amy's relentless persuasion, coupled with the subtle yet persistent nudges from family friends who echoed Amy's sentiments, wore down Sarah's resolve. "You have so much potential, Sarah. Don't waste it on a whim," they would say, their words echoing in Sarah's mind like a relentless drumbeat. Finally, after a particularly heated argument where Amy's disappointment was palpable, Sarah's resistance crumbled. The thought of constantly being at odds with her mother, the person she had always looked up to, was unbearable. With a heavy heart and a sense of resignation, Sarah signed up for medical school. She told herself it was just to get some peace, to silence the nagging voices of doubt and disapproval. But deep down, a part of her wondered if she was betraying her true self. On the day she enrolled, the process felt like a blur. Each form she filled out, each box she ticked felt like another step away from her dreams. The once vibrant images of her cozy bakery began to fade, replaced by the sterile, daunting halls of a medical institution. Sarah tried to convince herself that this was for the best, that perhaps with time she could learn to love this new path. Despite the initial reluctance and the lingering sense of loss, Sarah began her journey in medical school, trying her best to adjust to this new chapter of her life. Amy, feeling a sense of accomplishment in steering her daughter towards what she believed was a more secure and respectable future, became a regular presence in Sarah's college life. She often visited under the guise of checking in and providing support, but her visits were also a way for her to ensure that Sarah was keeping up with her studies and not straying from the path laid out for her. During these visits, Amy took the opportunity to meet Sarah's group mates, introducing herself as a concerned and involved parent. Her charismatic and authoritative demeanor, coupled with her genuine interest in the students' academic pursuits, quickly endeared her to Sarah's friends. Over time, she became a sort of mentor to the group, offering advice and sharing her experiences from her own medical career. Her stories of late-night study sessions, challenging cases, and the satisfaction of saving lives painted a compelling picture of the medical profession, further cementing her influence over Sarah and her peers. Sarah's friends, impressed by Amy's accomplishments and grateful for her guidance, often spoke highly of her, reinforcing Amy's presence in Sarah's college life. Sarah's relationship with her groupmates took a complex turn as they began to secretly report back to Amy about Sarah's progress and well-being. This development, though rooted in their respect and admiration for Amy, inadvertently created an invisible network of surveillance around Sarah. Her peers, believing they were acting in her best interest, would share updates with Amy, discussing Sarah's great grades, her participation in group projects, and her overall adjustment to the rigorous demands of medical school. "Hey, Amy, just wanted to let you know Sarah did really well on the last exam. She's definitely getting the hang of this one might say during a casual phone call, thinking they were providing comforting news. Another might send a message, "Sarah seemed a bit down today, maybe the stress is getting to her a bit. I thought you should know these reports intended to be helpful." Had a dual effect. On one hand, they kept Amy informed about Sarah's academic journey, allowing her to feel involved and somewhat in control of the situation, reinforcing her belief that her intervention had set Sarah on the right path. On the other hand, they placed Sarah under a microscope, scrutinizing her every move and feeding into the pressure she felt to meet her mother's expectations. During one of her routine visits to the college, Amy decided to broach a new subject with Sarah. They sat in Sarah's modest, somewhat cluttered student apartment, surrounded by medical textbooks and notes. The conversation, which began with the usual discussions about classes and Sarah's well-being, took an unexpected turn when Amy brought up Mike, one of Sarah's groupmates. "Sarah, I've been talking to your friends, and I really think you should spend more time with Mike. He's such a bright and dedicated student," Amy began, her tone casual yet laced with a hint of intent. Sarah, caught off guard, furrowed her brows slightly. "Mike? Yeah, he's great in the group projects, very reliable, but why do you say that?" Amy smiled, leaning in as if to share a secret. "Well, I've had a few chats with him, and I must say he's quite impressive. Not just academically, but he seems like a grounded, responsible young man, the kind of person who has a clear vision for his future." Sarah listened, a mix of curiosity and apprehension growing within her. She knew where this conversation was heading. "I just think," Amy continued, choosing her words carefully, "that it might be good for you to have someone like him in your life, someone who shares your ambitions, who understands the pressures and commitments of this path you've chosen." Sarah could feel the unspoken implications of her mother's words hanging in the air. It wasn't just about having a study partner or a friend. Amy was envisioning something more, something deeper. The idea of Mike, whom she had always seen as nothing more than a dependable colleague, being considered as a potential partner was unexpected. "Mom, Mike's a great guy, sure, but we're just classmates, and honestly, I've got so much on my plate right now. I can't really think about anything else," Sarah replied, trying to steer the conversation away from this unforeseen territory. Amy nodded, her expression understanding yet filled with a hint of disappointment. "Of course, honey, I understand. It's just a thought, I only want the best for you, someone who can be a partner in every sense of the word." The conversation gently shifted away from Mike and back to safer topics. But Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that her mother's vision for her life was becoming increasingly prescriptive. From her career to her personal life, it seemed there was a plan laid out for her, leaving little room for her own desires and dreams. The idea of being gently nudged towards a relationship, especially with someone as closely tied to her current life as Mike, made Sarah feel even more trapped in a narrative she hadn't chosen for herself. Sarah's apprehension soon turned into reality as Amy, undeterred by Sarah's initial resistance, began her campaign to nudge Sarah towards Mike with the same tenacity she had used to convince her to pursue medical school. This time, however, the advice wasn't about studying harder or focusing on her career, but about how to attract and hold Mike's attention. "Sarah, a little effort in the way you dress wouldn't hurt. Maybe wear that nice dress you have, the blue one. It really brings out your eyes," Amy would suggest, her tone light but persistent. Sarah, who had always valued comfort over style, especially in the high-pressure environment of medical school, found this shift in focus bewildering. Her wardrobe, a collection of casual jeans, comfortable shirts, and the occasional unisex piece, had never been a point of contention until now. And remember, dear, being in a relationship requires a level of seriousness. You need to show that you're committed, that you're thinking about the future," Amy continued, her advice sounding more like a strategic plan than matters of the heart. Despite Sarah's protest that she was not interested in dating, especially someone from her study group like Mike, Amy's words were like a constant, unyielding stream, wearing down Sarah's resolve. Sarah couldn't help but recall the last time she had been swayed by her mother's persistent persuasions, which had led her to a career path she hadn't chosen for herself. The parallel between the two situations was stark and unsettling. Feeling cornered and exhausted by the relentless advice and the looming fear of disappointing her mother yet again, Sarah reluctantly agreed to go on a date with Mike. The decision felt like a concession, a way to pacify her mother's insistent visions for her life, rather than a step taken out of genuine interest or desire. On the day of the date, Sarah stood in front of her mirror, dressed in the blue dress Amy had recommended, feeling out of place and uncertain. The reflection staring back at her seemed like a stranger, someone playing a role, rather than living her own truth. As she left for the date, a sense of resignation hung over her, a silent acknowledgement of the compromises she was making in an attempt to navigate the complex web of expectations and aspirations that defined her relationship with her mother. The aftermath of Sarah's first date with Mike left her feeling more disconnected and disheartened than she had anticipated. Throughout the evening, she had tried to engage to find common ground beyond their shared academic pursuits, but the spark that one might hope to find on a date was conspicuously absent. The conversation, while pleasant, felt forced and superficial, underscoring the vast gulf between participating in a group project and sharing a romantic connection. Returning home, Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Amy's romanticized talks of love and passion felt alien to Sarah's current experience. The concept of love, with its depths and complexities, was something Sarah had never truly explored. Her focus had always been on her personal aspirations and the ongoing struggle to meet her mother's expectations, leaving little room for romantic endeavors. The idea of forcing a connection, especially under the weight of her mother's expectations, felt wrong on a fundamental level. Sarah sat hunched over her desk, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The night outside was cloaked in a veil of mist and drizzle, the kind of weather that usually comforted her, making the world outside match her internal state of mind. The clock ticked past midnight, and Sarah's eyes flitted between the lines of her paper and the rain-speckled window. The words on the screen seemed to blur, blending into an indistinct mass of letters. Despite the fatigue that weighed on her eyelids, a restless energy buzzed beneath her skin, an undercurrent of anxiety that refused to be stilled. Just as she was teetering on the edge of sleep, her phone buzzed, shattering the silence and jolting her back to reality. The screen illuminated the dark room with a harsh light, the word "Mom" flashing ominously with a sense of foreboding. Sarah reached for the phone, her heart racing. "Hello," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. The voice that greeted her was not her mother's, it was a man's, calm and gentle, yet it carried the weight of unwelcome news. "Is this Sarah?" "Sarah, this is Dr. Evans. I'm calling from the hospital. It's about your mother, Amy." Sarah's grip on the phone tightened, her breath catching in her throat. "What happened? Is she okay?" There was a brief pause, the kind that stretched on for an eternity, filled with unspoken truths. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. Your mother had a heart attack. We did everything we could, but she didn't make it." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, each one a hammer strike to her heart. The room seemed to spin around her, the familiar contours of her life suddenly alien and unrecognizable. Her mother, the indomitable force that had shaped so much of her existence, was gone. "But I just talked to her yesterday." "She was fine," Sarah stammered, the words barely making their way past the lump in her throat. "We're here for you, Sarah. When you're ready, we'll need you to come to the hospital." The call ended, and Sarah sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, the buzz of the dial tone a distant echo. The world outside her window seemed to fade away, the rain a silent witness to the profound shift in her world. In the depths of the night, with the storm raging outside, Sarah faced the stark reality of a future without her mother. The arguments, the disagreements, the unmet expectations all seemed trivial now, washed away in the tide of her grief. In the silence that followed, Sarah realized that her journey was no longer about proving something to her mother or following a path laid out for her. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, Sarah knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainty. But for the first time, she felt a sense of clarity. In the wake of Amy's sudden passing, Sarah's world crumbled piece by piece, each revelation more shocking than the last. The stability and predictability of her life, already hanging by a thread, disintegrated, leaving her grappling with a reality she could scarcely comprehend. The first blow came with the unexpected truth about Mike. He had always been a constant presence, a seemingly supportive figure. However, the facade crumbled when Sarah discovered the hidden agenda behind his attentiveness. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you, and I should have been the one to tell you sooner," Mike began, the unease in his voice betraying his usual confidence. "What is it, Mike?" "You're scaring me," Sarah responded, a knot forming in her stomach. "It's about the house and why I've been around so much," he confessed, struggling to meet her gaze. "What do you mean?" "You were around because we were friends, right?" Sarah's voice wavered, a sense of dread washing over her. Mike sighed, the weight of his deception heavy on his shoulders. "Amy promised me the house if I married you. I thought I could grow to love you, that it wouldn't matter in the end. But it's not right, and you deserve to know the truth." Sarah felt as if the ground had been pulled from under her feet. As if the betrayal wasn't enough, Sarah's life was further upended by the arrival of her mother's half-sister, a woman she had scarcely known, claiming rights to Amy's house. "I'm sorry for your loss, Sarah, but I have legal rights to this property," Amy's half-sister Jane stated coldly, her lawyer by her side. "My father invested in this house, and it's only fair that I get my share, but this was my mother's house, and she wanted me to have it. We were a family here," Sarah protested, her voice breaking with emotion. "Emotions don't change legal documents, Sarah. The law is clear, and I intend to claim what's rightfully mine," Jane retorted, her gaze steely and unwavering. Armed with paperwork and a lawyer, Jane wasted no time in staking her claim. Her connection to the property was rooted in their common father's financial contribution to its purchase. The house, once a symbol of familial stability, became a battleground of inheritance, leaving Sarah not only bereft of her mother, but also of her home. The relationship with Mike, built on shaky ground and now overshadowed by deceit, couldn't withstand the tumult of Amy's passing and the subsequent revelations. Their breakup left Sarah feeling even more isolated. With the loss of her financial support, Sarah's academic struggles came to a head. The facade of maintaining satisfactory grades, a charade she had managed through a combination of cunning and desperation, crumbled. Exposed and unable to meet the demands of her medical program, Sarah found herself ousted. Her dreams of appeasing her mother's ambitions, or perhaps finding her own path within them, were dashed. Desperate and without options, Sarah turned to her friends, pleading for a place to stay. "Guys, I'm really stuck here. Is there any chance I can crash with one of you for a bit?" Sarah asked, the worry evident in her voice. Her friends exchanged uneasy glances, weighed down by their own set of challenges. "Look, Sarah, you know I'd help if I could, but the dorm rules are strict. They do room checks and everything. I can't risk losing my spot," one friend replied, a mix of apology and helplessness in his tone. "Yeah, and with everything on my plate, I'm barely hanging on as it is. Maybe you can stay for a night or two, but that's all I can do," another added, her voice laced with regret. Sarah nodded, understanding their predicaments but feeling the sting of rejection. She attempted to fly under the radar, to sneak into the dorms and carve out a semblance of stability. It was a game of cat and mouse, one that ended when security caught her. "Sarah, we've had reports of you staying in the dorms without authorization. This is against the policy, and I'm afraid we have to ban you from the premises," the head of security said firmly, his face void of emotion. "But I don't have anywhere else to go." "Can't you make an exception?" Sarah pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'm sorry, but rules are rules. We have to ensure the safety and security of all our residents," he replied, unmoved by her plea. And just like that, the ban from the dorms added another layer to Sarah's growing list of lost places of refuge. After the fallout, she had managed to find a semblance of stability working at a local fast food restaurant. It was far from the future she had once envisioned, but it provided a routine and a means to survive. Each day was a repetition of the last taking orders, serving customers, and cleaning up at closing time. It was mundane, yet it offered a distraction from the chaos that had become her life. However, just as she was beginning to adjust to her new normal, another curveball was thrown her way. One morning, in the midst of the breakfast rush, Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Clutching her stomach, she rushed to the restroom, barely making it in time before she was sick. She tried to shake it off as a one-time thing, perhaps a stomach bug or the result of the previous day's exhaustion. Her fears were confirmed a few days later when a pregnancy test showed two distinct lines. The reality of her situation hit her like a ton of bricks. Pregnant, jobless, and alone. The weight of her circumstances threatened to crush her. The day her manager saw her getting sick, he pulled her aside, his expression a mix of concern and regret. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but I have to let you go. It's not just about today, it's a liability issue. And we can't take the risk," he explained, his voice low. Sarah's pleas fell on deaf ears. She knew the restaurant couldn't afford to keep an employee who might frequently be ill, especially not in a fast-paced environment where every hand was needed. "I truly understand how tough this is for you, and I wish things were different," her manager began, his voice laden with genuine regret. "But you know how it is here. We're always in the weeds, and being short-staffed just isn't something we can afford. Especially not now," he continued, his gaze sympathetic yet firm. I know. It's just, I really needed this job," Sarah replied, trying to hold back her emotions. "I'm so sorry for any inconvenience I caused," with a heavy heart and a final apology. Her manager handed her the last paycheck. "Here's your final paycheck, Sarah. I've added a little extra. I know it's not much, but I hope it helps you out, even if just a little," he said, extending the envelope toward her. "Thank you, really. And I'm sorry again for all of this," Sarah managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper as she accepted the envelope, feeling the finality of her situation weigh heavily on her shoulders. Now, standing outside the cheap motel where she had spent her last dollars, Sarah felt the full weight of her isolation. The bustling streets seemed to close in around her, the noise of the city a stark contrast to the silence of her despair. With her belongings in a worn-out bag and the knowledge of the life growing inside her, Sarah felt both protective and utterly terrified. As Sarah wandered the streets, lost in thought and weighed down by her own troubles, she almost didn't notice the small figure ambling along the sidewalk. It was a little boy, no more than 3 years old, walking with the aimless determination that only a child can muster. Sarah looked around, expecting to see a parent or guardian in close pursuit. But the street was eerily devoid of anyone who seemed connected to the child. "Hey there, little guy," Sarah approached cautiously, not wanting to scare him. "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" she asked, her voice gentle. The boy looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes and simply stated, "Walking." Sarah's heart clenched at the simplicity of his answer. Kneeling down to his level, she took his tiny hand in hers, a protective instinct kicking in. "Can you show me where you live?" she asked, trying to mask her concern. The boy nodded, his hand gripping hers as he pointed vaguely down the street. As they walked, Sarah's mind raced. How could a child so young be left to wander alone? The situation felt surreal, a strange interlude in the midst of her own personal crisis. Yet, as they moved forward together, Sarah felt a flicker of purpose. Walking hand in hand with the little boy, Sarah navigated through the dimly lit streets until they reached the residential area. The boy's pace quickened as they approached a particular house, his small finger pointing confidently. "There," he said. Sarah hesitated for a moment before approaching the door, her heart pounding with apprehension. She knocked. The door swung open, and a woman appeared, shrouded in a haze of cigarette smoke that billowed out into the cool air. Her hair was disheveled, her expression one of mild annoyance rather than concern, as the boy rushed to hug her leg, exclaiming, "Mommy." The woman's gaze remained fixed on Sarah, unblinking and unsettling. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she finally spoke, her voice tinged with indifference. "Yeah, what do you want?" Sarah stood there, dumbfounded by the woman's nonchalance. The situation, which had seemed so urgent and fraught with worry, was met with a casual dismissal that left Sarah reeling. "What do you mean? What do you mean?" "Your child was out there in the middle of the street, all on his own." She couldn't help but let out a nervous, almost hysterical laugh, shocked by the mother's indifferent demeanor. The woman's attention shifted to her son, her tone casual as if discussing something as mundane as the weather. "Were you really?" she asked, to which the boy, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, nodded enthusiastically, a bright smile on his face. "Yes," with a dismissive wave, the woman instructed her son. "Didn't I tell you to stay inside? Go watch your cartoons." The boy, unbothered by the scolding, scampered off, leaving Sarah and the woman alone. The woman faced Sarah again, her expression unchanged, repeating her earlier question with a hint of impatience. "So, what do you want?" Taken aback by the lack of concern and responsibility, Sarah felt a surge of frustration and disbelief. Her mind was full of questions about the safety and well-being of the child. Just as Sarah was about to walk away, her thoughts swirling with concern for the boy, a car rolled up to the curb. A man stepped out, his presence commanding as he approached the doorstep where Sarah stood. He offered a brief nod in Sarah's direction before his gaze settled on the woman at the door, with a quiet, stern intensity. "Noah, let's go," Kitty called out, his voice firm. The sound of his name had the boy darting out from the house, a bright smile spreading across his face as he latched onto the man's leg in a tight hug. Without further ado, the man took Noah's hand and started leading him towards the car. Sarah, driven by a mix of confusion and a deep-seated worry for Noah, couldn't hold back. She stepped closer to the man, her voice laced with concern. "Excuse me, but what's going on here? Where are you taking him?" Her questions were genuine, spurred by a fear of what might lie ahead for the child. The man paused, his eyes narrowing as he misjudged Sarah's intentions, seeing her through a lens tainted by past experiences. "That's none of your business," he shot back, clearly mistaking her for an associate of the boy's mother, perhaps one of many he presumed to have contributed to the chaos surrounding Noah's life. Sarah, taken aback by the man's hostility but undeterred in her concern for Noah, made a bold decision. She reached out, taking the boy's other hand, her resolve hardening. "I'm not going anywhere until I know this child is safe. I'll call the police if I have to," she stated, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions churning within her. The situation had escalated far beyond what she had anticipated when she first noticed Noah wandering alone, but she was prepared to stand her ground for his well-being. Sensing the tension in Sarah's unwavering stance, the man took a moment to reassess the situation. His initial defensiveness faded as he realized his harsh reaction might have been misplaced. With a sigh, he loosened his grip on Noah's hand and turned to Sarah with a more open demeanor. "Look, I'm sorry for snapping at you," he began, his voice softer now. "I'm just here to pick up Noah. His time with his mom for the week is over, and it's my turn to have him." Seeing the shift in his attitude, Sarah relaxed slightly, though her concern for Noah remained. The man studied her for a moment, his curiosity piqued. "Who are you, anyway?" he asked, genuinely wanting to understand the stranger who had taken such an interest in his son. Sarah took a deep breath, her mind still reeling from the day's unexpected events. "I'm nobody really. I was just walking by when I noticed Noah all alone on the street. It worried me," she explained, her voice tinged with the residual worry of finding a child unattended. The man's eyes widened slightly at the revelation. "You don't know his mom? You just found him and brought him back here?" he inquired, piecing together the sequence of events that had led to this unforeseen encounter. Sarah nodded, confirming his understanding. "Yes, exactly. He pointed out this house when I asked him where he lived. I had no idea who I'd find here," she said, hoping her actions would now make more sense to the man. Kevin listened intently to Sarah's recounting of how she found Noah. After she finished, he pulled out his phone asking for her contact information, just in case, he said, introducing himself as Kevin in the process. As they were about to part ways, Kevin offered her a ride. "Thanks, I don't really have anywhere to go anyway," she admitted. Kevin's brow furrowed, concern evident in his voice. "What do you mean by that?" he probed gently. The floodgates opened, and Sarah's tale of misfortune spilled out. The words tumbled from her lips in a rush, a litany of loss and upheaval. She spoke of her expulsion from college, the death of her mother, the end of her relationship, and her dire financial straits. Then, after a brief pause, she revealed the most vulnerable part of her predicament: "And I'm pregnant." Kevin's reaction was unexpected. There was a moment of silence, a brief interlude filled with empathy and understanding. Then, reaching into his wallet, he handed her a wad of cash. More than a mere gesture of goodwill. "There's a decent hotel nearby. You should get yourself a room there, at least for now," he suggested, his tone firm yet kind. Sarah was taken aback, her eyes widening in surprise. In a day filled with uncertainties and the kindness of a stranger, this act of generosity was a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in her darkest hour, there were still flickers of light and humanity. Grateful for Kevin's unexpected kindness, Sarah managed a heartfelt thank you as he and Noah prepared to leave. With the money he had given her, she followed his advice and checked into a hotel nearby, a welcome change from the uncertainty of the streets. The comfort of a warm shower and a safe place to rest was a luxury she hadn't realized she'd been craving until that moment. The following day brought another surprise. Kevin called, asking her to meet him in the hotel lobby. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Sarah made her way down, finding Kevin seated in one of the plush chairs, looking somewhat out of place in the elegant surroundings. As she approached, Kevin stood up, his expression earnest. "I wanted to apologize for how I reacted yesterday," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "I was worried sick about Noah, and I didn't know who you were." I thought you might have been one of Laura's friends," he explained, referring to his ex-wife. The sincerity in his apology and the clear concern he had for his son painted a picture of a man caught in the complexities of co-parenting in Bath, the aftermath of a difficult relationship. As they sat in the quiet of the hotel lobby, Kevin began to open up about his past. "Laura and I met at this private party my company's partners threw. It was one of those fancy, over-the-top events," he started, a faint smile playing on his lips at the memory. "We hit it off pretty quickly, and things moved fast from there. Before I knew it, we were married, and then Noah came along." He paused, his expression clouding over as he reached the turning point of his tale. For a while, everything seemed perfect, like something out of a storybook. But then one day, everything changed. Kevin's voice dropped to almost a whisper, the pain evident. "I found Laura at my best friend's house under circumstances I just couldn't overlook. It was a betrayal that cut deep, not just because of her, but because it involved someone I considered a brother." Kevin's unexpected visit to Hank's house started off as an innocuous surprise. With the casual familiarity of long-standing friends, Kevin knocked on the door, ready to catch up over an impromptu morning visit. When Hank opened the door, his surprise was evident, his wide eyes betraying a hint of panic under his casual demeanor. "What brings you here so early?" Hank managed to ask, his voice strained under the weight of hidden truths. Kevin, ever the joker, brushed off the awkwardness with a laugh. "Since when do I need an invitation to drop by, man? Come on, let me in," he said, his tone light and teasing. Hank's hesitance, however, was palpable. Clad in nothing but a bathrobe, he fumbled for excuses, claiming he needed time to get dressed and mentioning a special someone he had brought home. Kevin, taking the hint but still unaware of the depth of the betrayal awaiting him, agreed to wait outside, chuckling at the thought of his friend's embarrassment. But as he stood there, a nagging sense of unease began to take hold. It was then that he noticed a familiar jacket in the hallway, one he recognized all too well, the expensive custom order he had made for Laura. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, each realization hitting him harder than the last. Driven by a need to know the truth, Kevin quietly made his way to the garage. The sliver of light through the crack in the door revealed the unmistakable sight of Laura's car, confirming his worst fears. In that moment, the world as Kevin knew it crumbled. The trust and camaraderie he shared with Hank, the love he thought he had with Laura, all shattered by the undeniable evidence of their betrayal. Collapsed on the steps, Kevin was engulfed by a storm of memories, each one intertwining the lives of the three of them: himself, Laura, and Hank. These memories, once treasures of camaraderie and love, were now twisted into harbingers of betrayal. He pondered the countless moments they had shared, the laughter, the support, the bond that he thought was unbreakable. Unable to bear it anymore, Kevin stormed into the house. Hank was banging on the bathroom door. "Hank, aren't you going to introduce me to your girlfriend?" Kevin's voice was flat, devoid of the humor that typically laced their conversations. Hank, still unaware of Kevin's discovery, attempted to brush off the question with a dismissive joke about the mystery woman's shyness, but Kevin persisted, his tone tinged with a cold edge. "When did you become so sly, Hank?" "You know me," Kevin said. "Always been this way, right?" He chuckled, trying to deflect. Kevin nodded, a hollow gesture of agreement. "Right," he echoed, the words heavy with the weight of his newfound realization. "But it turns out I don't know you at all." Just as the tension reached a peak, the door opened again. Laura emerged, clad in a bathrobe, her hair damp and wrapped in a towel. Oblivious to the silent storm raging between the two men, as Kevin saw her, his voice was heavy with irony. "Here comes my pretty wife." Laura's immediate reaction was one of shock, her composure crumbling as she laid eyes on Kevin. What are you doing here?" she exclaimed, her tone accusatory as though Kevin was the one out of place. "Are you spying on me, Kevin?" she demanded, the realization of her predicament dawning on her. "Why did you do this?" Kevin, her questions, meant to deflect blame, fell on deaf ears. Kevin was reeling, the betrayal slicing through the love he had for her, leaving a gaping wound in its wake. Laura's tactics shifted from accusations to excuses, a desperate attempt to rationalize her actions. She claimed illness, neglect, and confusion, but her words were like whispers in a storm. unable to quell the turmoil raging within Kevin. Then came the apologies. Laura's desperation was tangible as she knelt, pleading for forgiveness not for her sake, but for Noah's. But her pleas were overshadowed by the deafening silence of betrayal. Kevin's gaze turned to Hank, who sat defeated, his face buried in his hands. How long? Kevin's question was more an echo of his heartbreak than a demand for answers. He knew deep down that their betrayal wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a breach of trust rooted in the very beginning of Kevin and Laura's relationship, facilitated by Hank himself. Kevin and Hank's friendship traced back to their college days, filled with dreams and aspirations. When Kevin's venture, a tech startup, began to flourish, it was only natural for him to bring Hank on board. Hank, with his background in marketing and sales, seemed like the perfect fit to be Kevin's right-hand man, helping to navigate the company through the burgeoning market. But beneath the surface of their professional camaraderie, a vein of envy pulsed within Hank. Hank had always harbored a silent jealousy towards Kevin, envying not just the success of the business but the ease with which Kevin seemed to navigate life's challenges. Kevin, with his charismatic leadership and visionary ideas, had the Midas touch, turning ambitious projects into successful ventures, garnering respect and admiration in their circle. Meanwhile, Hank, despite his contributions, felt overshadowed, his efforts always a step behind Kevin's gleaming achievements. Kevin, oblivious to Hank's growing resentment, continued to value and trust him as a confidant and key player in the business. Sarah listened intently as Kevin shared the heart-wrenching details of his past, her expression a mixture of sadness and empathy. When Kevin spoke of the divorce and its aftermath, how it had devastated Laura, leading her down a path of unchecked substance abuse, Sarah could only nod, remembering the state in which she'd found Laura's home. "You already saw that," Kevin remarked, a hint of bitterness in his voice, referencing the disarray and neglect Sarah had witnessed firsthand. As Kevin delved into the custody battle for Noah, he mentioned something that took Sarah by surprise. "Sarah, you could really help me here," he said, his voice laced with a mix of hope and desperation. "You've seen how Noah has been neglected by his mother. Your testimony could make a difference in court. Help me get full custody of my son." Sarah, taken aback by the gravity of what Kevin was asking, looked into his eyes, seeing not just a man wronged but a father fiercely protective of his child. The idea of stepping into a courtroom, of being involved in such a personal and painful dispute, was daunting. Yet the memory of Noah's small, trusting hand in hers, the vulnerability she'd felt in his presence, resonated deeply. In that moment, Sarah realized the impact her actions could have, not just on Kevin's life but on Noah's future as well. Standing before the judge, Sarah did her best to maintain composure, her voice steady as she recounted the day she found Noah wandering alone on the street. She detailed the indifference displayed by Laura upon the child's return, emphasizing the lack of concern for his safety. Across the courtroom, Laura was a picture of turmoil, the realization that she might lose her son casting a shadow over her. Her hands trembled, her eyes darting anxiously, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Witnessing Laura's distress stirred a complex whirl of emotions in Sarah. Despite the necessity of her testimony, she couldn't help but empathize with Laura's fear of losing her child. The life growing inside her had already begun to awaken a deep maternal instinct, a bond she was only beginning to understand. The courtroom's decision marked a turning point for Kevin. Joy and relief washed over him as the judge granted him full custody of Noah. He was overwhelmed with the prospect of providing his son with the stability and nurturing environment he'd longed to give. In a gesture of gratitude for her crucial role in the proceedings, Kevin invited Sarah to dinner that afternoon. Amidst the clinking of cutlery and the soft murmur of other diners, they delved into conversations about futures and dreams. Sarah, with a hint of wistfulness, shared her long-held aspiration of working in a bakery, of immersing herself in the simple joy of baking. Kevin listened intently, a spark of an idea forming as Sarah spoke. He revealed his recent acquisition of a restaurant, a venture born out of opportunity rather than passion, now lying dormant and in need of a new direction. "What if you took over the restaurant and gave it your touch?" he suggested, his eyes alight with the potential he saw in her. The offer took Sarah by surprise. The concept of running a restaurant was both thrilling and daunting. She was without a home, let alone the means or knowledge to manage a business. The myriad challenges of such an endeavor loomed large, casting a shadow over the excitement. Sarah expressed her heartfelt thanks to Kevin for his generous proposal, yet she hesitated to accept. "I'm flattered, really, but I have to find my footing first," she explained, her voice tinged with the uncertainty that defined her current situation. She needed stability, a foundation from which to possibly rebuild her dreams, but not under these precarious circumstances. Kevin's smile in response was one of understanding, even admiration. He had anticipated her caution. Kevin took a deep breath, the words he had been rehearsing in his mind finally finding their way out. "The day you grabbed me by the hand and said you were going to call the cops, something changed in me," he began, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "The way you were so protective of Noah when his own mother didn't care what he was doing, it made me realize you deserve better than all this." There was a sincerity in Kevin's eyes, a depth of feeling that Sarah hadn't expected. He continued, "I want to help you, Sarah, not because I feel sorry for you, not because I owe you, but because you deserve it. You deserve a chance to put things right for yourself." Later that evening, Kevin led Sarah to his house, a gesture of support that went beyond mere words. He showed her a room comfortable and inviting, making it clear that this was her space for as long as she needed. "I'm not a freak or anything," he assured her with a half smile, trying to lighten the mood. "You're free to leave whenever you want. I just want to make sure you're on solid ground before you make your next move." Sarah, overwhelmed by the kindness and understanding being offered, felt a glimmer of hope in the midst of her tumultuous journey. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains as Sarah woke, a sense of peace enveloping her that she hadn't felt in ages. A silent house greeted her as she stretched and made her way to the kitchen, preparing breakfast for herself. She reveled in the simple act, a stark contrast to the chaotic mornings of her recent past. As she sat alone with her thoughts, the weight of medical school, the expectations, and the relentless pressure seemed to dissipate into the morning air. Memories of her mother surfaced, bittersweet and poignant. Yet, for the first time, Sarah felt a sense of release from the demands that had once shackled her spirit. Her gaze landed on a note left on the counter. Kevin's handwriting offered a simple message, "Whenever you're ready," accompanied by the address of the restaurant. It was a gentle nudge, an offer of support without strings attached, a testament to the trust and respect that had blossomed between them. Emboldened by the restful sleep, the quiet reflection, and the unexpected opportunity laid out before her, Sarah stepped outside. With each step, she felt the stirrings of hope, the dormant dreams of her childhood slowly awakening. That day marked a new beginning for Sarah, a journey towards a future she had longed for but never dared to pursue. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time it was entirely her own. From her very first day at the restaurant, Sarah felt an indescribable joy. Immersing herself in her work, she not only poured her heart into the restaurant, but also transformed half of it into the bakery of her dreams. Attracting an early crowd eager for her freshly baked delights, pride swelled within her as she crafted sweets and cakes, her passion evident in every bite. Evenings became a cherished time for Sarah, spent with Noah and Kevin, forming a semblance of a family she hadn't anticipated. Noah, ever curious, filled their time with questions, his innocence bringing light and laughter. His inquiry about the baby, wondering if it was his sister, was met with a shared smile between Kevin and Sarah, an unspoken connection in the awkward yet tender moment. As time passed, the bakery, though a source of immense joy, started to compete with the pull she felt towards this makeshift family. The comfort of their company, the routine they had settled into, made the thought of leaving increasingly unbearable. The realization dawned on her, a shadow over her happiness, that this arrangement couldn't last forever. 5 months into her successful venture, Sarah broached the topic with Kevin, suggesting it was time for her to earn an official salary and find her own place. Uncomfortable with the thought of imposing any longer, Kevin's reaction was one of silent surprise, a pang of unexpected sorrow at her words. He had grown accustomed to her presence. Her absence was an unwelcome thought he hadn't dared to entertain. As Sarah began to pack, Kevin found himself at her doorway, a silent figure wrestling with emotions he had yet to fully acknowledge. When Sarah's voice broke the silence, a mix of confusion and a silent plea for an answer, the air between them was charged with unsaid words, a mutual reluctance to cause pain or discomfort. Yet beneath that was a deeper reluctance to part ways. Kevin, gathering his courage, broke the silence with a confession. "Sarah, I don't want you to leave." Sarah's response was a mirror of his own heart's desire. "I don't want to leave either." In that moment, as Kevin closed the distance between them, their first kiss sealed a new chapter, a tacit acknowledgement of the bond that had quietly formed, binding their lives together in a way neither had anticipated. Just a week after Kevin's heartfelt proposal, he and Sarah exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony surrounded by those closest to them. It was a simple affair filled with warmth and genuine happiness, eschewing grandeur for the comfort of shared joy and love. In the months that followed, their family grew with the arrival of baby Ava. Kevin was a pillar of support, ensuring Sarah and Ava had everything they needed. Sarah, embracing motherhood with an open heart, found a joy she hadn't known was possible. Noah, too, adapted to his role as a big brother with an endearing sweetness, fully embracing Ava as his sister. As the holiday season approached, their home was filled with the warmth of family preparations, a sense of completeness that Sarah cherished deeply. During this time of festive cheer, Sarah felt a pull toward one final act of closure and reconciliation. With Kevin's supportive nod, she packed the children into the car and headed towards a place that once held much pain, but now promised hope. Arriving at Laura's, the absence of an immediate response did not deter Sarah. They waited patiently until Laura's figure finally appeared, marking the beginning of an unexpected reunion. Laura's initial confusion quickly gave way to recognition, and the sight of Noah rushing into her arms was a poignant moment of connection. Inside Laura's modest home, Sarah introduced Ava, extending a bridge of peace and understanding. Laura, changed and humbled by her struggles, shared her journey towards recovery and her hopes of rekindling a relationship with Noah. Their conversation, once fraught with tension, now flowed with empathy and mutual respect. By the time Sarah and Laura hugged, there was a sense of healing, a mutual acknowledgement of the roads they had traveled and the futures they hoped to build. Sarah's promise to discuss a path forward with Kevin, one that ensured Noah's emotional well-being and connection to both his parents, was a testament to the strength and compassion that had guided her through her own tumultuous journey. On the eve of Christmas, Sarah felt a pull towards one final act of reconciliation. With baby Ava in tow, she embarked on a heartfelt journey back to her small hometown. There, amidst the quiet of the cemetery, she stood before her mother's grave, a tapestry of emotions woven through her heart. For a long while, she remained silent, letting the memories and feelings wash over her. Then, with a voice tinged with both sadness and love, Sarah spoke to her mother. "I forgive you," she whispered, the words lifting a weight she hadn't fully realized she'd been carrying. "And I love you, Mom, and I'm thankful for everything you've given me, for the life you brought me into." With those words, a profound sense of peace enveloped Sarah, a closure to the chapters of her past that had been silently written in pain and misunderstanding. As she drove back home, the world outside seemed to mirror her newfound tranquility, the road stretching out like the promise of a new beginning. Returning to Kevin and Noah, Sarah was met with the warmth of a home filled with love and the anticipation of Christmas. Their celebrations were simple, yet imbued with a deep sense of joy and contentment, marking not just the holiday but the journey they had all undertaken to reach this moment. That Christmas was more than a festive occasion. It was a celebration of new beginnings, of forgiveness and love, and of the family they had become. In the glow of twinkling lights and the laughter that filled their home, Sarah, Kevin, and Noah found the sweetest joy in being together, a testament to the enduring power of love and the beauty of second chances.